Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? So I actually decided that this whiteboard behind me is gonna be our new way to add a little bit of visual to exactly what it is that I'm talking about, so that you're able to also see how it all relates and correlates. Maybe sometimes when I lose focus about what specifically I'm talking about, I'll be able to utilize that in a way that will help us connect the dots, because that essentially is one of the most important things that we talk about every single time that we're talking about loss prevention. And the one thing that I see on different YouTube channels that I want you to stay away from, that I would stay away from even as a person with common sense, is anything that is not teaching you how to be better or how to implement stuff that is based off of what somebody might consider things that they do well, like, oh, I'm really fucking good at getting people. That's cool and all, but in every scenario or every situation, depending on the store manager, you might not have that luxury, or even as an LPM, because you have to remember, at the end of the day, that store belongs to the store manager. It doesn't belong to the LP manager. At the end of the day, the LP manager is going to need district approval to try to overthrow any of the store manager's decisions. And even then it becomes very difficult, because the store belongs to the store manager. The store manager and the LP manager aren't at the same level, no matter what you think. Store manager still wins at the end of the day. Just like an LPM and a DM aren't at the same level. There's still a hierarchy that you have to understand. So what we're gonna do today is use this whiteboard to really display not the hierarchy, not any of this other shit. Maybe I'll just take it all out. But today's focus is the policies and procedures, because I hear a lot of YouTube videos, a shitload of YouTube videos. And you might be asking yourself, Vicente, what did it cost you to invest in these very, very cool markers that show you how much ink is left in them? And this whiteboard, well, the whiteboard I already had for Vicente, and the markers are just better versions of what he already had as well. So I'm not tripping on that. But what I am worried about is that the videos that I'm seeing, that people are stating that policy and procedure of what they're doing, and that's the reason why they're able to do what they do, is so stupid. Because at the end of the day, there is no policy and procedure. And let's just break it down. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, forgive my writing if you're not able to understand that or read it, but what it says is that there is absolutely no such thing. This is the most important thing that you should understand. There is no such thing as a policy or procedure that justifies your decision to apprehend. There is nothing that you will be able to ever tell a customer, ever tell a person that you are in the middle of apprehending. There will never be something that you'll be able to tell an employee, an associate, minus. And we're talking about apprehension. I don't want you to relate this, the minus, code 50s, parcel checks, any kind of baggage check. That is the only exception to this rule, because it is not affiliated with apprehension. That's important for you to know, that when we're talking about this, we're talking about your decision to apprehend. There is no policy or procedure that is going to justify your decision to apprehend. There's nothing. So when I see YouTube videos, and it's important for you to know that when there's all these people that have such a huge amount of likes, such a huge amount of views, and they're influencing young LP agents or LP agents that are trying to do something to refresh their career, because it happens where you have droughts, where you can't close an internal case and they're on your ass about it. I understand those situations, but there is never going to be a policy that the company writes like that will back you up from making a bad decision. It's important for you to understand that. And it's also important for you to understand this. It is absolutely imperative that you understand this, that every single policy and procedure is there to protect the company and its employees. That means this: if you make an apprehension and it goes sour, the very first thing that I've seen when it comes to LPs being terminated is that the referencing point is always the policies and procedures. The policies and procedures that you believe are there to protect you when you make an apprehension are actually there to make sure that you continue to drive the safety and the safe and secure environment, or the safety culture in the store. Because at the end of the day, every bad case that goes wrong that ends up in court ends up with a lawsuit. And whether we lose as a company, you should think of it as whether the company loses a small portion of money or loses thousands, at the end of the day, that loss is resulted in the contribution of the store, and that means it's going to come out of somewhere, and somebody needs to get blamed. And that's the sad part about it, is that people think that the policies and procedures are there to protect them, but it's not. And yes, you are an employee of whatever retailer that you work for, but at the end of the day, you make a bad stop and it could potentially have caused a safety issue to the people around you, to the customers, to the employees, to management, to anybody. If you put yourself or anybody else in harm's risk over something that you are not sure, or something that is just not worth it, at the end of the day, you could be put on a leave. And you could be saying, well, why am I being put on a leave if I'm just doing my job? But I can just always go back to the policies and procedures when I'm sitting there talking to you, and let you know that the very first thing that we talk about when we talk about being an LP is always, number one concern is always the safety and well-being of each other, and the people in the store, the people around us, everything. If something would have went wrong and a customer would have got hurt, big time lawsuits. Like, you're talking about the fact that you decided to do something when you knew that there was people around you and that things could get sour really fast. Let's just say that, for instance, you're going to make an apprehension and it's for a value that is not exceeding $50. But when you initiate the stop at the door before that person exits the building, because now there's a lot of LP, there's a lot of stores that won't let you go past the point of entry, meaning that you need to block them off before they leave the actual store, or it needs to be within the very first, let's just say 10 feet. Usually there's like a cutoff where they're like, we don't want you to pass that line. And once you pass that line, you've hit no man's land. And it is going to be very clear that at that point, if you attempt to make an apprehension and you detain somebody beyond that point, and they feel like you were not justified in making that apprehension or that stop beyond the point that you knew was very clearly marked. I've seen people get terminated. I've seen people lose their job over that, over something stupid. I've seen people lose their job over trying to make an apprehension that they knew potentially put customers at risk. Let's just say, this is another example, that you have the exit point right there. That's the exit point. You have an LP agent right here. That's my LP agent. And then you have somebody coming out, right? They're coming out this way. But at that same time that they're coming out, they're using a customer as a shield. We've all seen it, right? We've all seen that happen. So what happens? The LP agent tries to dance around. So does this person try to dance around. And this customer unknowingly is in the middle. So what do you try to do? You try to go around and block the customer towards the door so that this person cannot run this way, right? And you try to get the customer that's right there to be your defense. And the sucky part about that is that if the customer in any way, shape, or form gets hurt, there's no excuse for that. And that's what we talk about. The policies and procedures are very clear to what you're supposed to do in situations like that. You just have to let it go. But there's people with this thing that we call here, it's one of the biggest policies and procedures that you have to leave at the door. That right there says ego. Keep you in that moment. Keep you where you are going to be at the disadvantage, no matter, even if you're the bigger person, you're the more combative person, you're the more dominant person, you know that you could see it in his eyes that he's gonna bail, that he's gonna dump, that he's nothing. No matter how you feel or how you think that you are, that ego could potentially put somebody at risk. And when it comes down to the policies and procedures of what you're supposed to do, the company's gonna not side with you anytime, ever. The other thing that happens is that this happens all the time. 100% certainty. What that means is that I've seen apprehensions go sour. I've seen people attempt to stop somebody. I've seen people get fired because they believe that, whether it have been that they trusted somebody behind the camera to make sure that nothing was dumped, whether it be that they felt like they knew what they had seen. There are so many things that could potentially lead to what we're talking about with the 100% certainty, is that you have to understand that nothing that you do should be done from an assumption. You should always, I'm not talking about the initial observation, the initial selection. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about when it comes down to the apprehension at the door. Everything that we're talking about right now for policies and procedures is related to the door and on the sales floor. It has nothing to do with the actual initial observation. Just because somebody at the door, let's just say, because sometimes there's door greeters, right? Door greeters will make observations and call people out. If a door greeter calls somebody out and you make an observation and that person seems legit, back off. Yes, there should be somebody that always is going to keep an eye on them, because you're not going to let that tail go. But if you don't feel like it's something that you need to invest in, I've spoken on this already, let it go. Because then this comes into factor, the ego. And then with the 100% uncertainty, because you need 100% certainty to be able to move forward with the apprehension, the 100% uncertainty, at the end of the day, policies and procedures are there to protect the company and its employees. Nothing in the policies and procedures are there to protect an apprehension. Nothing. After you go through with the apprehension, from that point when you decide that you're going to apprehend, from the point that you put all your people into play to apprehend, from that point you have already made the decision to separate yourself from these statutes and limitations. That's what we're going to call them, statutes and limitations, because you then understand that you are putting yourself in the risk of violating these policies and procedures due to safety reasons, due to ego and uncertainty. And let me change that, because I'm going to put this right here, uncertainty, but you need 100% certainty, but you get it. You understand what I'm trying to say. And the reason why it's important that I say this, the reason why it's important that we go over this, is because it's very, very important for you to know. Let me put it to you like this. Every single day for the past 2 days, I've been watching YouTube videos. And every single one of the YouTube videos has broken, from a manager perspective, policy and procedures. Number one, why would you ever sit there and explain to a customer what it was that made you initiate an observation? I've seen so many videos that have LPs that have been burnt and that are defending their reasoning behind why they're making an observation. Never in the history of ever should you ever do that. Because as soon as you say that you are deciding to observe somebody based on their selection, that can be considered profiling. They don't know shit about shrink. They don't know anything about what your job duties are. That's what you have to assume. So when we talk about the policies and procedures, it's important for you to understand how they relate, because the policies and procedures very, very clearly state in every single company that I've ever heard about or worked for, that it is absolute zero tolerance for prejudice, profiling, and then all the other like sexual harassment, retaliation, all of those things, right? But my point is simple to this whiteboard and to this lesson that we're trying to go over, right? The policies and procedures are there to protect the company and its people and the employees. And every single time that I've lost an LP agent, every single time that I've had to make the determination whether that person is a risk to the company and everything that we're doing as a team and as a unit, every single time I've referenced policy and procedure and had to decide, was that clear as day, that I was very clear when I went over that policy and procedure, when they read through their manual, was it clear as day? Did the company state very clearly what its position is on all of the policies and procedures? And every single time it's going to be a yes. Because before you get the green light, you go through all of that training. Before you're able to hit the sales floor or do anything that's fucking fun when it comes to LP, you have to be trained. And every job training is different. Every amount of training is different. But the one thing that stands to be the same is the policies and procedures that protect the company's employees and itself. And it's important that you understand that, because every single time that I watched a video in the past 2 days, I felt like they were drawing the line out like if it was nothing. And they talked about living up in the moment and then how it feels, the rush and all the adrenaline. And yes, that's so flippin' true, that when you know that you have everything working for you, the policies and procedures are in the back of your mind, you have already made sure that you are 100% certain, you've gone through all the steps to see the selection and all the way up to the point where they're about to exit and past the point of sale, and you have everything in place, all the team players and everything, the adrenaline rush is there. But let's just say that all of those things are there and somebody decides to pull out a knife. At the end of the day, your job is not to combat that person. Yes, if your life is at risk, defend yourselves at all costs. You should not go home in a casket. You should go home alive, and that means by any means. By any means. But the sad truth is that the policies and procedures, when something like that happens, say that you should let it go. And that is the part where the ego comes in, that you need to understand that a lot of these YouTube videos that I have seen, that I kept watching off of recommendation, off of one after another, let the ego get boosted. Let the ego boast between teams and show videos of actual apprehensions and all of those things, and that's great for a team to feel that way about each other, the confidence and everything about each other. But once that shit goes sour, or once something happens that you didn't expect to happen, and your ego is still there and it can't fucking snap out of it and say this isn't worth it, that's when you might feel the wrath of the policies and procedures. So it's important for you to know this, that once we go into this LP series, everything starts with the foundation of what we're doing. And yeah, I really want to break down all of the things that we have learned over the years, because you see a lot of the comments in my LP videos, a lot of people reference and bring up points of, and newbies want to join in and ask questions. It's just that you have to really, really pay attention to the very, very most important thing of all. The things that could get you fired. The things that could help you from doing something stupid. The policies and procedures of your company. So when we talk about this in one of my first videos, where I talked about what it was that is the most important thing to do as a trainee, ask questions. Because the policies and procedures are going to be very, very clear to what the company wants you to do in a lot of different circumstances. But the number one circumstance that they're always going to want you to do is protect its people. Yes, they want you to drive shrink. Yes, they want you to make apprehensions. Yes, they want to see internal closed cases. Yes, they want to see you close out big ORC cases. Yes, they want to see all of that. But they don't ever want to see it at the cost of somebody getting hurt. Because if something happens and there's a customer in the way, the person pulls out a weapon, everything that could potentially go wrong will not end up in your favor. And that's when you have to say, wasn't worth it. I'm I'm gonna get that motherfucker next time. But this time, it wasn't worth it. And you have to be able to do that from an LP agent perspective if you really want to make a 5-year, 10-year run. Because most of the people that end up getting fired are within their first 6 months. Sorry to say, but it is so true. It's really hard to keep an LP job when you don't understand the role, when you're just trying to be Brody, when you're trying to fight everybody, when you have that fucking steroid mentality and your ego won't go anywhere. It even sucks when that kind of person's on your team, because then they put you in harm's way. So remember this. Everything that you do with 100% certainty, 5 steps all the way up to the door, you need to understand that the policies and procedures are there to protect the company and its employees. That means you. So at the end of the day, no matter what the value is, no matter what it is that you could potentially lose, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. If they pull out a knife, your job. If they pull out a weapon, your job. If they pull out any kind of harmful thing and use in a way that would potentially put your life at risk, your job is to remember the policies and procedures at that moment. Save your own life, move out of the way, let it go, because it's not worth it. Your job is to go home every day. And there will be that motherfucker when he comes back, and he's gonna get his. It happens all the time. Those people feel like they have a power over you, and the next time they come in, you already have PD there, you already have the case built, you already have all of the things that you need, so that this motherfucker could find out the hard way that that's not how we play. We let the justice be run through the system, and see you next time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's gonna be a very edited and chopped, screwed and put together video, because I feel like I really wanted to try to bullet point everything that you're gonna hear from this series. But the very first thing was to make sure that I used this whiteboard to really give you guys an understanding of what it was that I was thinking and how I see it, because it's not only gonna benefit you, but it's gonna benefit me, to make sure that I put my points in a row so that you're really able to understand and see how it is that it's going to be beneficial to you, and how it is that maybe you might not have to use that. It all depends on the person. It all depends on the situation. Again, everything is situational. Nothing can be used for the same circumstance for 2 different people. It doesn't matter what you say, it cannot. Because 2 different people doing the same exact thing are going to react 2 different ways, and that's the way you have to see it every time. So just remember, policies and procedures are there to protect the company and the safety of its employees. Nothing in those policies and procedures is there to back you up. Remember that. And we're not talking about parcel checks and code 50s and whatever you guys call them at your store. We're not talking about those. Those are there to protect you. That is there to protect you. And if you have internal theft, that's where we're going to find it. And we will get to those soon.